This video is a follow-up to an old scenario I did almost a year ago now. There will be a link to that video in the description and comment section, so go check it out if you haven't already watched it. Now I have to implore you to not be too judgmental. The visuals are not as impressive, and it was one of my first alternate history scenarios, so it certainly isn't my best work, but it is a fun scenario that I want to expand on nevertheless. The Commonwealth of Severoslavia is one of the oldest continuous, semi-democratic, and federal union-style governments in the world. It's officially ruled by the Commonwealth's king, who is both King of Poland, Grand Duke of Lithuania, Duke of Ruthenia, and Tsar of Russia. But in more practical terms, this king does not hold any actual power, and actually never even held absolute power. Ever since 1569, the Commonwealth has been jointly ruled by kings and the Sejm, or parliament. This parliament had to approve any laws that the king wanted passed, and over the centuries, more and more power was granted to the parliament, and the laws were also changed so members did not have to be nobles, making it one of the oldest continuously governing democratic institutions in the world. But with that said, there's plenty more to cover, so let's move on to Severoslavia's geographic makeup. The Commonwealth of Severoslavia, being the largest country in Europe by far, is certainly diverse when it comes to geographic makeup and climate. The vast majority of the nation consists of the Great European Plain, a massive flat region with little to no mountains. Here the landscape is mostly covered by farmland and forests, with some occasional swamplands. The plain also varies great in climate, with the southern portions having a more Mediterranean climate and the northern portions being more Arctic. In the far east of the nation you will also find the Ural Mountains, which make up Severoslavia's eastern border, and in the far south there is the Caucasus Mountains, which make up the southern border. As briefly mentioned in the intro, Severoslavia is a federation. It's made up of the Kingdom of Poland, the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, the Duchy of Ruthenia, and the Tsardom of Russia. Despite the different titles, which would have meant something in the Middle Ages, these entities are equal members of the Commonwealth who all have representatives in the parliament. On the left here, you can also see the Commonwealth members ranked in terms of population, the most populous of them being the Tsardom of Russia, which has a population of almost 87 million. Worth mentioning about Russia, though, is that it is very diverse linguistically, which is why, as you will see later, Severoslavia is not completely Russian-dominated linguistically. In Russia, there are many Ruthenians, Poles, and countless other minority groups along the Urals, Caucasus, and in Karelia. Russia was for many years considered the outskirts of Severoslavia and Europe, and did not hold much importance. But after a long industrialization process, Russia grew in importance, and despite still being more rural and poorer, Russia today is arguably the most important federation member alongside Poland. What Poland has in wealth and development, Russia makes up for in sheer size and population. Russia is also home to important industrial centers such as Moscow. After Russia, the next most populous is the Kingdom of Poland, with a population of almost 63 million. Poland has historically been the economic heart of the Commonwealth, and was only in more recent history surpassed by Russia in terms of population. Having been industrialized first, and still being by far the most developed, Poland is the richest Commonwealth member. It's home to countless important cities, including the capital of Severoslavia, Warsaw. Not far behind Poland is Ruthenia, which has a population of 52.5 million. Ruthenia was originally a part of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, but it was later on transferred to Poland, becoming a duchy within the Kingdom of Poland. This duchy was eventually fully separated and even expanded, becoming an equal member of the Commonwealth. Ruthenia is home to the most important agricultural region in Severoslavia, as it provides most of its food with its great soil. In terms of wealth and urban development, Ruthenia is somewhere in between Russia and Poland, and has several major urban centers, the most notable being Kiev. Lastly, we have Lithuania, by far the least populous Commonwealth member, with its 23 million people. Although it is the smallest, Lithuania is also the most diverse member, as it is not home to any one major linguistic group. The most widespread languages in the Grand Duchy are Ruthenian and Polish, but there are significant Lithuanian, Latvian, and Estonian populations as well. The Grand Duchy of Lithuania is fairly rural and focused on agriculture like Ruthenia to the south, but at the same time it also has some of the more important Baltic port cities, the main one being Riga. The Commonwealth of Severoslavia, being the largest and most populous nation in Europe, is of course also home to some of Europe and the world's most important metropolitan areas. The largest metropolitan areas in Severoslavia are listed here, ranked in terms of population. With a metropolitan population of over 12 million, Warsaw is by far the most important city in Severoslavia. On top of that, it's also the second largest metropolitan area in Europe, right after London. Warsaw had always been the center of Poland and the Commonwealth as a whole, but the city really started to become the megacity it is today during the late 1800s and throughout the 1900s as the country as a whole became increasingly industrialized and urbanized. The second largest metropolitan area in Severoslavia by quite a decent margin is Moscow. Moscow became a major city much like Warsaw during industrialization, which did happen a bit later in the Russian portions of the nation. During this time, Moscow was the center of Russia, and thus when the nation became more urbanized, Moscow saw much of that growth. Gdansk is the third largest metropolitan area in Severoslavia, and the second largest in Poland. Gdansk is home to Severoslavia's most important port on the Baltic coast, and has grown to prominence for that reason. And fourth is Kiev, the largest Ruthenian urban center. After that comes Katowice, another major Polish city. Then Novigrad, Russia's main port city. Minsk, a mostly Ruthenian city located in the Grand Duchy of Lithuania. Then Krakow, yet another Polish city, and one with quite a bit of history at that. Then Nizhny Novgorod, the third largest urban center in Russia. And then finally in 10th is Riga, the Grand Duchy of Lithuania's main port city. The Commonwealth of Severoslavia has a population of 225 million, making it the fifth most populous nation in the world, behind China, India, the US, and Indonesia. As has already been alluded to, Severoslavia is a pretty diverse nation. It has 3 main languages and countless minority languages. The largest linguistic group in the nation is the Polish speakers. They make up a bit over 35% of the nation, and the vast majority in Poland itself. But Polish has also spread far to the east and is a major language in even Ruthenia and the Grand Duchy of Lithuania. In a very close second are Russian speakers, who make up just under 34% of the nation. Russian is by far the most widespread language in the Tsardom of Russia, as well as in other Siberian nations to the east. After that, the third and final major language is Ruthenian, which is spoken by 24% of the nation. Ruthenian is a language mainly spoken in Ruthenia and Lithuania. It used to be much closer to Russian in the past, but has been influenced a lot by Polish over the centuries. Russian has of course also seen Polish influence, but Ruthenian has even more so, becoming a language that is today somewhere in between Russian and Polish. After that, the remaining roughly 7% are a mix of various groups, the main ones visible here being Lithuanian and the other Baltic languages, as well as a mix of various languages by the Caucasus. There are countless other minority languages, such as in Karelia, but these are spoken by small minorities and thus aren't visible on the map. Now let's take a look at the economy of Severoslavia. The Commonwealth of Severoslavia has a total GDP of close to 8 trillion, making it the largest economy in Europe and the third largest in the world, ahead of Germany and Japan by quite a bit, but still behind the giants of China and the US. Per capita, Severoslavia is at around 35,000, which is comparable to Italy and makes Severoslavia a relatively rich country ahead of most of the world. It's just not quite as rich as countries like Germany, Scandinavia, Finland, or the US when we're talking per capita. When it comes to international relations, Severoslavia is quite well placed, being a member of several defense pacts and organizations. It is itself the leader of the Eurasian Alliance, an alliance that was formed following the Great War that includes Finland, Scandinavia, and much of Eastern Europe. This alliance was essentially formed to defend Severoslavia's neighbors in the case of a resurgent Germany, and from the Republic of China in the east. It was of course also a way for Severoslavia to project power outside of its borders without direct military conquest. But as Germany became a republic and never again went down the path of expansionism, the alliance began to increasingly work with the American-led NATO and Pacific Alliance to contain China and its Asian puppet states, making the Eurasian Alliance an extension of the various American alliances and a part of the pro-democracy world that stands in opposition to the authoritarian China with its Asian empire of puppet states. But that's all for now. Stay tuned for more content, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell button if you haven't already. Also consider becoming a member if you want to support the channel more directly. See you in my next video.